Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the IHC, Iowa Healthcare Collaborative Lean Challenges Hospital Engagement Network Lean webinar. This is going to be kind of just a general webinar for those individuals in the Hospital Engagement Network or any of your community partners. My name is Sarah Pavelka, and I am one of the faculty members here at IHC. The webinar is recorded on July 19th, but this information, just to let you guys know, is out there and available for you at any point in time. So and there's not specific information presented today that you can't be using later on down the road. So excited to have you participate today, and excited to have it share some information for you regarding your lean work. So let's talk a little bit about the objectives and the agenda, what we're going to walk through today. There are four main areas of things that we're going to kind of walk through. Each one gets a little bit more and more in-depth. We are going to cover the culture of lean and some tools that you can use to increase or enhance your lean work, or really any process improvement work in your organization, and talk a little bit about some planning and how to continue to deploy your process improvement efforts and make them more sustainable or more hardwired, if you will. We're also going to talk about the lean tools and maybe some new tools that you have not necessarily had before within your organization. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about return on investment. So the things that we're going to cover today, and at any point in time, if you have any questions following this webinar, please feel free to contact us at IHC, and we are more than happy to help you and further your advancements with your continuous improvement. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the first things that I want to do is work on kind of a foundation of lean and what we're talking about when we really talk about lean practices. Most of us know the definition of lean to improve waste and improve your organization. But we also want to talk a little bit about some of maybe the principles, or if you will, the culture or paradigm of lean. There are a few things listed here that you can consider that culture of lean. The first thing is value to the customer. Pretty straightforward. All of us talk about value to the patient and value to the customer. But if we think about our work and a lot of the stuff that we do, is because we ask the patient to experience that with us. We don't necessarily think about, do they want it or do they not want it? So patients come in and we do education and training and prevention and all this stuff with them, and they may or may not want that. Then we ask them to go home or go to another facility, and wow, what do they really get out of that? Other than being healthy and hopefully safe while they're in your organization, what did they really value? And so lean focuses on what is it that the customer wants, what are they there for, and how are we providing those services to those individuals that come into our system. Lean also focuses on involvement of the people and leadership, and a little bit differently for each group, but both of them are critically important to be involved in your efforts. The first one, involvement of the people. We have to think about involving the folks that do the work, those that are involved in it directly. We don't have a very good success if leaders are whisked away to a conference room and they come back and say, okay, I declare this is how we're going to do the work from here on out. It's bad practice, and it's difficult to actually implement within your organization when that's kind of the way to do the work. Instead, involve those folks that are doing the work and those that are really in charge of, if you will, the work within your organization, and really the boots on the ground, because you want to have those folks bought in, engaged, and being able to help you improve the organization. Leadership also needs to be involved, and I want to say involved in the right way. not dictated to where the improvements are, but really involved in the area of support and time and effort and resources. And you want to be careful because so many times we, as leaders, come into the organization and declare, I think I have the answer and I want to be the problem solver, and they come in and they kind of ignore those that are really doing the work and what needs to be changed in real life versus how they thought or how they used to consider the work to be done years ago. Which leads to the next principle. For lean, many of us need to have a safe environment to feel comfortable, to brainstorm and be innovative, and to be honest and open about what's really happening. So the organization needs to have an environment where they feel comfortable and secure with being open and saying, hey, this is really what's going on, and this is what I'm seeing, and this is the concerns that I have. And if they think it's punitive at all within the organization, you're going to have people really hide issues and hide defects, and in the long run, that's going to be extremely detrimental to your, really to the customer and to the patients. Lean does take time. We need to focus on planning and focus on the flow of materials and information and really the cost, the quality, and the time of our efforts. It's not something we can just randomly do. We have to think about being able to share and be open, and this does take effort. It does take time, and we want to be able to have it be sustainable, and so sometimes we have to plan in advance and really focus on an improvement. It's kind of, if you will, short-term pain of planning and focus on a team for long-term gain. Otherwise, we're going to continually just fight fires. The next one is reduction of waste. Most of us have talked about waste and understand what waste are, but we have to be able to actively engage our people in alerting us to these and being able to talk about what needs to be done. And then last but not least, lean is a continuous improvement. If we think we can have a one-shot quick fix and have it be done in one simple team, it's just probably not really realistic, and we need to think about it. It is an ongoing effort of improvement. Mentioned earlier that there are these 7 wastes, and they're listed here, and most of you have an opportunity and you've seen these before, but kind of continuing to drive waste out of your system and value into your system and being able to effectively change your organization based on reduction of these or elimination, if you will, of these. And so we need to be able to effectively understand where these are and be open and honest. So I thought I would take some time to list these here and, again, review them for you just real briefly and make an effort and make a concerted note that these are important to be able to drive them out in your organization. So when we think about lean and the concepts of what we just talked about, whether it's the principles or the waste and kind of the concepts of it, I really like this image and the image that's coming up here in the next slide, these 2 slides. I'm a big one for visual imagery, and this is called the House of Lean, and it focuses on things that we would need to do or would want to consider within your organization. Think of this as the how to implement lean. And there's 4 different layers here, and I'll take a minute to explain those 4 layers, but each of them have a specific point or a specific value to those layers. So let's talk about the top. We've talked about this roof already, the customer-focused, people-centered, process-oriented organization, that culture around lean and driving in value. And that's really the roof. That's what keeps all of this together and on top, and the reason that we're doing this. Then the next layer down is 2 ways of thinking when it comes to lean. And this is where the new information in this presentation, I'm creeping in some new information. So maybe you guys have been practicing lean principles and doing this and doing great tools and pulling this together in your organization. But here are some other ways that you can, again, take your lean efforts to the next level or the advanced of it. These 2 pillars, one marked just in time and the other one marked Dakota, are 2 concepts of thinking within the organization. So just in time and being able to think about having the supplies, the material, the information there as you need it. So right in time, right in the place. And we'll talk about some of the tools within that coming up later today in this webinar. The other one is Dakota, which is a Japanese word for building in quality. And this is more of a conceptual concept of driving out errors. So doing things to error-proof your organization. So again, driving in the value, driving in the quality within your organization. These 2 ways of thinking or the ways of working will help you within your organization continue to sustain or hold up the purpose and the value which is listed in the top. Then you start to get into some of the tools. And these areas of standard work, stability, and Kaizen. Again, many of us are doing these tools. We get these tools. We're doing PDSA cycles and waste walks and 5S and those things. And so we're starting to see how the concepts, the values, the way of thinking, and the tools start to blend together. And then last but not least, the foundation, those things that you need within your organization to have it be successful, to have it be important and respected, if you will, within your organization, or seen as something that people get it part of a culture. And so these 4 kind of layers come together to build the house of lean and really to build the culture of quality. And again, this is kind of the how work is getting done to build that culture of quality and culture of lean within your organization. So what happens if you build this house? What happens if you put all this stuff together? Well, this, in similar fashion in that house, really are the outcomes or the results. So in the slide before, we talk about, okay, here's how you do it. And this next slide is what happens or why you want to do it. And these are the outcomes, and you guys can read through these. And so, you know, these 2 together, kind of the how and the why, if you will, of lean, really give us an in-depth view of putting that culture of continuous improvement based on lean in one image, and really be able to say, are we driving our organization to this? One of the things that I want you guys to do is kind of the first takeaway from this is I want you guys to study these 2 images and really look at it and say, are we doing this? Are we being successful in this area? And then are we getting these results? So the prior slide, we may want to think about, you know, looking at it and saying, you know, this is the work that we're doing. Are we implementing some of these tools? Could it benefit us to implement more of these tools, more of this way of thinking, more of this accountability, urgency, leadership ability, so implementing these within our organization, but then ending up with these results. Are we getting what we want? And if the answer is no in any of those questions, then go back to these 2 slides and say, let's evaluate and maybe redo or re-implement some of this critical work that we call continuous improvement within our organization. So, with that being said, the next part of the presentation, actually the next 2 or 3 parts of the presentation, are really parts of the presentation that I have found organizations struggle with. In my work and doing this and been doing it for a long time, I find that some organizations are not successful as they want to be. And if we can continue to work and implement better practices of continuous improvement in lean, we will be more successful. So I picked a few things off these slides, the last two slides, and we're going to dive into them a little bit more in depth. And so you have a concept of maybe ways that you can continue to improve within your organization. So this first one. I want to stress that I think there's some great leaders out there, and but I think one of the things and the reasons that we struggle with implementing lean and using the tools and really creating this as a culture or philosophy is leaders don't understand how valuable they are to its implementation. And really being able to look across the board and say, I get my role, I get it that I have to be out there, I get it that we have to be supportive and not dictate, but be supportive and give my people what they need to make improvements. And so what it starts to become is it starts to become a human-centered based organization. So you can see there on the left of this slide that our traditional way of thinking, CEO, upper management, C-suite, dictates to middle management, which dictate to staff, and often we could put another layer on here, which dictate to the patient. And when we start to flip that and we start to look differently at our organizations and flip them upside down, it becomes that we need those leaders to support and honestly balance within our organization that it's harder to do the balance act on the right, and but that really becomes a quality organization, and we really start to see that cultures shift and cultures change based on those kind of supportive behaviors versus the dictative behaviors. So where does this start? This starts with belief. This starts with the ability for leaders to be able to say, at the core of our organization is our mission, our vision, our values, which turn into behaviors and knowledge, which then spread into structures and systems and then out to the culture itself. And so we have got to, as leaders, understand that this method of continuous improvement and quality within our organization starts at the core and starts at that belief in the center. And those are opportunities, and those are things that we need to talk about within our organization. And again, evaluate yourself and your organization and say, where are we along this scale of maturity? Other things that you can do and you can continue within your organization is to start to implement different practices of lean. I thought this was, in relation to another area, a focus area. Many of us get stuck within our toolbox. We get great skills in maybe value stream mapping or some of the technical traits that we have within lean, but we do a great job of standard work or whatever it may be, but we need to think about what do highly successful organizations that implement lean, what are they doing? And I liked this source. This is from one of the most common lean principles, but I liked it because it talks about the percentages of organizations that are doing this work within their organization. And we may be hitting kind of the top half pretty consistently within organizations, but where are we at implementing some maybe of those more challenging concepts or practices of lean? And I think we could, look at this and use it as an evaluation tool for our own organization and say, what could we do better? But I also think we could look at it and say, wow, if 93% of our organizations that we work with are implementing standard work and they are, doing it well and that's making them successful, then, and we're not, well, is there a chance? Is there something that we could be doing here to help us improve our practices of lean? So just being able to think about this, so use it as a evaluation tool, and then also look at, say, wow, if these are successful organizations and they're doing this stuff, why aren't we? So then I'm going to kind of throw in a couple more concepts here, and what I have also found is it takes some other ideas of continuous improvement thinking. And you can see from these 6 concepts, these are the things that it takes kind of, I want to say, above and beyond just knowing the tools, above and beyond the concepts of running a PDSA cycle. We have to be able to think about what are some of these other concepts and what are we doing and how well are we doing this within our organization to make our continuous improvement efforts successful. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of them. The first one I'm going to talk about in more depth and in more detail, but we could have a conference on each of these as well, but think about what else are we doing within our organizations to be successful. So let's talk about systems. When we think of a system, and this is one of the concepts, it is a set of related entities that receive inputs, adds value, produces an output or a service, and it's done to achieve a mission, a vision, or an aim. It is a system of interrelated subsystems that are put together, that interact, and are subject to sub-optimization. So think of this as your human body. The human body is a system. We receive inputs, food, sleep, we do something with them, and it produces our ability to be able to think and act and do all the activities we want to do within a day. Our organizations are no different than this. A hospital organization is made up of people and departments, and we receive customers and supplies. We do things with them, and hopefully in the end of the day, we help our patients be happy and healthy. And so a hospital or even a department is considered a system. And we need to be careful on how they interact or how they don't interact, and which creates sub-optimization. And so part of kind of moving your advanced lean practices to the next level is, or potentially lying here, in how well are you considering yourself to be a system? And how well do you consider the work that you do to be integrated and aligned around systems thinking? So some opportunities for improvement as well. Taking a look at a systems analysis, here is a small image, but an image of a systems analysis. So one of the challenges that I have for you as you start to dive into, maybe it's a process improvement team on falls or hospital acquired or sepsis or whatever you're working on, how well do you have the systems analysis laid out? Have you had a conversation around our purpose and inputs? Have we looked at the feedback loops? Those are all important things to think about, because if we're finding that we're not successful within our improvement efforts, maybe it's the fact that we're not acting as a system, but yet more of as a subsystem or sub-optimization, and we're not getting our biggest bang for our buck. So we want to start to think about, are we or do we, have we analyzed the system as we continue to move forward? What happens if you do have success and you are able to continue to move forward? Make sure I get to the right slide. Sorry about that. Go forward, not backwards. Then making sure you're going forward, not backwards. You always want to go forward towards success. So again, my own little technical glitch there to be able to help you understand it. But what happens when we do have systematic success? Well, our approaches and our changes and our culture they're defined and things are well deployed. People understand what we're doing. Learning does occur and we have integration of the mission, vision, and values. And so we start to see kind of the why behind our organization starts to look at the fact that we are more successful and we do have integrated, more long-standing, sustained success within our improvements. And honestly, we start to provide that value in the patient safety and the quality and all of our goals that we wanted to within the organization. They are easier to do. It becomes more and more mature. So if we look at that maturity, we start to see that before when we think systems or we're not thinking systems, we were just kind of really reacting. And then we start to use those systematic, well-deployed practices and it becomes more aligned and integrated. So using that concept of systems thinking, moving toward maturity, being able to again, expand on what we're doing and how we're doing it will be one of the key critical components to any continuous improvement effort, whether it's Lean or Six Sigma or PDSA or ISO or whatever it is, using that concept of systems thinking and understanding the system will help you integrate that into your organization. Speaking of integration, when we focus on Lean, many of us don't take that time to plan and to deploy it very well within our organization. And so we do find that we struggle. We do find that we have opportunities for improvement, even within our improvement models. So jumping into some of those and having a conversation about those, I think, is critical within your organization. So let's give us some things for you to talk about. The first one, and you can probably tell that I like those models. This first one is, talking about, putting it all together, or the Lean iceberg. Many, many times, we're really good at seeing and the things that are above the waterline or that are visible within the organization. So the tools and the technology and the supplies and the process management teams that are going on and all those things where people are running around and physically seeing it and doing it, and those are great. And honestly, in the next few slides, we're going to talk about even more of those, and so it's very important. But the things that we just talked about, the systems and the leadership and the culture side of things, are often things that are under the waterline. Those are things that happen in the conference rooms, that happen in the culture, that happen, and really the patients tend to, or rarely, see what happens. So it's the strategy and the leadership and the behaviors of those individuals kind of behind the scenes that's really important to make sure that we have both of these within the organization and that we have a focus on both. So the first half of this WebEx that you guys just sat through really kind of focused on the stuff, honestly, that's underneath, that's on the water, and now we're going to start to move into what's the stuff on top. But we have to understand that it's both on top and underneath. We can't do just one or the other. So let's focus on some Lean tools. Coming up in the next few minutes, we are going to focus on a number of Lean tools that you can use within your organization, again, to kind of kick things up a notch, if you will, and really start to do things differently. Now, some of these may have not been as familiar within your organization or within your toolbox, but now's an opportunity to start to look at those and say, how can I use maybe some of these less familiar Lean tools to be successful within my organization? So before we do that, though, I wanted to kind of put it all together for you again in another image to be able to say, how do these all fit together? A lot of us are really good at doing value stream mapping, and that kind of starts to get us into this and say, where do our problems exist and what is the current state and where do some of those problems lie? And then using some of these other lean tools to be able to be successful in kind of fixing the issue or fixing where the problems lie, or if you will, waste reduction. And so kind of thinking of these together, again, a lot of us are good at value stream mapping, or we've at least tried it within our organization. We may have done some of the others like 5S or standard work, but now's our opportunity to talk about some of these others that are on this, in this house of lean tools, and we need to start to think about integrating these to kind of get to the more of those advanced skills. So in no particular order, we're going to start with one of them. One of the first ones that I want to talk about is the concept of pull. Now, great concept, ideally, honestly very hard to get to in reality. So the concept of pull is really being able to focus or to get information and materials only when we need. So think about it if you want to, the concept of I pull it off the shelf when I need it, versus it being pushed on me before I'm ready to use it. So supplies are a really, really good one. You know, so do you go to the closet and get things out as you need it, or does a whole bunch of materials come to every patient room and they sit there and they just wait until you need it? It is a balance, and it is not always ideal to be able to do everything in a completely pull system, but our hope is in healthcare is that we can get as close as we can to a pull system, meaning going out and grabbing it, instead of it being shoved on us when we need it. So another example of a pull is think of shift change. If the nurse coming on to the shift wasn't ready, wasn't clocked in, didn't have her patient list yet, whatever all those answers are, and the nurse leaving went up to her and said, hey, can I give you shift-to-shift report? Here you go. Here's my information. And the nurse coming on just wasn't in the right time frame to get that information. It becomes a push system. So the nurse outgoing pushes the information instead of the nurse incoming going to her and saying, okay, I'm ready for it. Slightly different, but big in results. And so we want to think about pulling that. Why do we want to think about a pull system versus a push system? Well, anytime that you can pull information and get it when you need it, or pull materials and get it when you need them, is because it's going to reduce the defects or the storage that we have in the system. So think about that. If information sits there or supplies sit there, they could spoil, they could go bad. So if we use them just as we need them, it is an opportunity for you to be able to get into a good rhythm and a good opportunity to share information or share materials effectively. Part of pull, which is another concept, another tool, is called batch reduction. And so we think about reducing how much extra we have, and do we need it, when do we need it, and where do we need it. And so instead of having lots of extra stuff sitting around, you know, maybe it's wheelchairs, maybe it's paper, maybe it's linens, whatever it is, how much do we need, and really studying our processes and understanding our processes and what they call for, and then being able to effectively or efficiently deliver those that material and that information as you can. Thinking about reducing the amount of stuff, the batch, if you will. The next concept is one that I think some of us are more familiar with, but we don't always go to real quickly, and it's the concept of Kanban. A Kanban is the concept of a visual, and it's often a card that says, hey, this is where things go, this is where supplies are to be put, or this is where wheelchairs or equipment is stored. So think of a Kanban as either a card or a space and say, I understand what we need to do, how's it going to work, and when we're done with it. And so you have a spot for dirty linen, you have a spot for dirty equipment, you have a spot for equipment that needs to be gone through biomed, you have a spot on a shelf for different supplies. And so a Kanban card is going to be just a physical card, think of a recipe card, that talks about what goes there, how much is stored there, and honestly, if maybe where you need to get it if it runs out. And so it's that visual indicator, kind of those shelf markers, and it gives you an idea of what is supposed to be stored there. So think about it reducing chaos, reducing all the extra anxiety, and you guys have all been in your supply rooms when you walk in and it's just a crazy mess. So reducing that, that extra time it takes to find things in those areas. One of the other concepts related to lean is called quality at the source. And there are a few tools of which kind of fall into this category, if you will. And we've talked about batch reduction a little bit, so I'll start at the top and go to poke yolk. The concept of poke yolk is a concept that reduces or basically error-proofs a process from having a defect. So there's lots of examples in the world that we have today that we don't ever think about, but they have been basically engineered into our work. And for example, an outlet. An outlet is a system that has been poke yoked. If you have a 3-prong outlet, it can only be plugged in the same way. We can't flip it upside down, we can't have an error, we can't put it in backwards, whatever it is. And so it's been poke yoked, or it's been engineered to the point where it can only work the right way. There's lots of them in healthcare. IVs have some where you can only plug in the IV connectors the same correct way. There's lots of other ones, but we don't do enough in healthcare, I think, to prevent the defects from occurring at all. We do a decent job at root cause analysis, but what do we do to prevent it from even happening in the first place? And so those are concepts and innovative ways that we need to think about our care and say, what are we doing and what can we do to prevent those errors? The other thing that can play in that is called stop the line. And this is more of a culture or more of a philosophy of not passing those defects on down to the next person. So as a prime example, somebody registers at the front desk and somebody notices that maybe a birth date's wrong or a name is spelled wrong. Do they have the power and the ability to fix it right there? Or does it need to go through 16 sets of approvals to make it happen? And if they can fix it right there and basically alert and not pass that problem on, then that is called stopping the line. But so much what happens is good people working hard they notice something and they have no power or no ability to actually change it. So they say, oh, well, I'll report it to my manager, and then the manager, has to approve it, and then it goes to HIM, and it goes on and on and on. And in the meantime, the patient is receiving services with the incorrect information in their chart. And how many people use that incorrect information? And then we just have more and more problems moving forward. So thinking of stopping the line and not really letting that person proceed, obviously with good customer service, to be able to move forward within the organization. The next tool that I want to talk about is one that I think many of us probably have tried to use and maybe not so successfully, but it's a failure modes and effects analysis, or an FMEA. An FMEA is a tool, and sometimes people think it's a very complex tool. They kind of get blown out of proportion as far as how difficult they are. So I want to be able to bring this tool back to you and feel comfortable with using it after today. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think it's a critically important tool. It is one of the only root cause tools that allow us to look at a process and predict what could happen, whether that's a positive or a negative happen, and use it with certainty. And every other root cause tool, 5 whys, fishbones, Pareto's, they all look at the process after the work has already been done, after the defect has already occurred. Where the failure modes actually gives some sense of predictability and prioritization to what could be done to prevent the error from happening at all. And I think that's important for us to use and continuously feel comfortable with. So let's take a look at the FMEA as you move forward. This is, think of this kind of as an Excel spreadsheet for failure modes, and the first part of the tool is for you to fill out the first 5 columns. So look at the process. What are the process steps? Within each of those processes, here there's 3 process steps demonstrated. You would say, where could it fail? So if the person would be interacting with this process, where could there be a failure? What effects does that failure have? What are the causes of that failure? And do we have any control measures for them? So think of a patient admission as a process. One of the first steps in the process is to do the nursing assessment. Well, where could a failure occur? Well, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough staff, we're kind of short, we're doing it in a quick version, maybe they're in the emergency room and we got 3 or 4 people coming in, and so we don't have enough time. What could be the effects of that? Well, maybe we don't get a clear assessment and the patient is really a fall risk and we don't alert them, and so they could actually fall. Causes a potential fall, and what are some of our control measures that we have in place? Well, maybe we have a falls checklist that was included with the assessment, and so to be able to prevent that from happening at all, we have the nurses make sure that they run down or run through a quick checklist to ensure that they get all the parts and the pieces that they need. So that's kind of the first part of the FMEA. You do that for all the process steps, work through those first 5 columns. Then you shift over and you start to talk about the 3 data points within each of those processes. So the 3 data points are severity, SEV is severity, OCC is occurrence, and DET is detection. So what kind of what kind of severity could occur on a scale of 1 to 10? 0 meaning no, nothing, all the way up to 10, bad, terrible. Same way with occurrence, 0 meaning never probably occur, all the way up to 10 is most likely to occur every single time. And then last but not least, detection, which is a little bit different because it's an inverse, meaning you want a lot of detection, and so it has a little bit different rating scale. So you'd rate each of these rows on a scale of 1 to 10 in the areas of severity, occurrence, and detection. So, 6, 6, 7s, 5, 5, 5, whatever the numbers are across there, you give it 3 numbers. Now, I will warn you, when you start to do a failure modes, I would just go out there. There's a lot of great resources, and actually the Joint Commission has some standardized scales that you can get for what is the scales of 1 to 10 mean. So everybody's rating a 2 the same, and a 3 the same, and a 4 the same. So they're using those numbers the same for severity, occurrence, and detection. I would use those as cheat sheets. You can pass them out to your team, and that way you can definitely all be on the same page. So once you get those all scored, and if you do it as a team, feel free to, you know, kind of use group consensus or even group averages or whatever work for you. But then you multiply those 3 scores together, and that gives you the relative perception index, or RPN, and that's a score of your severity times your occurrence times your detection. The higher the numbers, the bigger concern it is. So if you have a really, you know, if you have 2 or 3 things that have a really high number, you want to start to focus there, and you want to start to focus on those. So that's the first, you know, number that you can use for prioritization and movement through here. The other one is just taking severity times your occurrence. Now, why would you want to do both? Well, your RPN number is going to include your detection, and I said earlier that the detection number is an inverse. So if you have a great detection, say maybe it's a checklist, it's actually going to inversely or reduce the total score there, versus the severity and occurrence don't include that, and you actually can then talk about, well, wow, if we didn't have a detection, this is what could happen. And so you want to look at both of those aspects, both the RPN and the severity occurrence score. Once you have those numbers, then again you can start to prioritize and make an action plan, and that's the last part of the slide. So a lot of information, I know, seems like lots of columns. You end up with lots of numbers and notes and names and things like that. But again, it's well worth it for you to start using a failure modes if you're not currently doing it. The next slide is, again, back to some of the lean tools that we can continue to use within our organization. It's called point of use. Fairly simple concept of being able to pull in the materials or the supplies or the resources right where you need it. So think about the layouts and where we're going and not wasting time. You know, what do you have at your desk that you need, or do you have to continuously run upstairs to the printer every time? So kind of those point of use ideas. To be able to mock up or design those spaces, we can often use a tool called 3P. 3P is a tool where you would literally in life size mock up the layout of an area. So you might want to rent a gym or go to your high school gym on a weekend or over the summer and start to lay out, whether it's in cardboard or tape or those kind of things, and lay out a new design area and ask yourselves, you know, if this is how we build it, are we going to be able to be efficient and effective and not waste an area? Are we going to be able to get carts through? Are we going to be able to get all the staff in and all those things that we would need? So kind of mocking it up and playing house, if you will. The next 2 tools actually are tools that refer to your work within it's kind of helping the speed or helping the time. The first one is talking about the single-minute exchange of dye. And now, I know this is a real manufacturing term, but when you think about single-minute exchange, what this does is it helps you think about turnover or being able to change things out quickly. So think of hospital rooms or surgical suites or closing a chart or assessing a patient. Can you do it at a quick rate of speed without hurting or affecting your quality? So how can we do that, removing that waste to be able to get it done and get out in a pretty quick, efficient manner? The other one is total production maintenance, or TPMs, and most of the time our maintenance guys are familiar with this, guys and gals are familiar with this. But what you want to think about is you know, are we using our equipment effectively and efficiently, and And do we have hiccups, or do we fight more with the equipment and using things, for example, carts and pushing things? Are we fighting more that and wasting the energy and wasting the time by just purely not going to a maintenance mode? Also, there is a time to think about, are we doing things preventatively? So your temperature checks and your quality checks and your maintenance checks, are we doing these efficiently and effectively so it doesn't break down and we don't lose equipment and we're offline for a whole week or day or whatever it may be? The next two tools really focus on working and balancing the work that's done. So the first one is to talk about flow. So are we reducing bottlenecks? Are we looking at those wastes and where there might be a pinch in the process and things don't flow effectively or if you will, very smoothly? And what you want to be able to do is reduce those, and so there's a nice even balance. One of the things that you can look at is a concept called takt time. And takt time studies the amount of time available divided by the demand. And now this will create a ratio, a rate, and obviously we want that rate to be as close to 1 as possible. So if you have, as an example, if we have 6 hours of surgery time and we have 7 surgeries, does that fit? Well, if each surgery takes an hour, you know you're quickly going to run out of time because you can only get 6 of them done. But if you have 7 surgeries and each one takes 30 minutes, now you've got a different conversation and you know that you have some space available in the time, in the schedule. So that's considered what we call takt time. Now, most of us probably have this conversation. They probably never called it takt time, but think about the different ways we can look at this balance or this rate to say, are we effectively using every minute of our time and efficiently in an effectively manner? So I covered a few tools and being able to get us an idea of what we're doing that may help increase or enhance our lean efforts within our organization by interjecting some new tools and discovering some new tools. One of the things that I do want to stress with you is that you give people, including yourself, an opportunity to move through these 4 levels of progress when it comes to learning new concepts. What does it mean? Can I explain it? Have I implemented it? And can I teach others? Is 4 ways to think about if I graduate through or progress through to be able to really fully understand and be effective in my own work and my own world. So kind of a note on these. Maybe now you've seen some of these new tools and now it's your challenge to go out and either explain it or start to implement and, again, stretch your professional and personal learning. My very last concept that I want to talk about is the concept of return on investment. So when we talk about enhancing our skills and maybe our skill set, one of the areas that I find with most quality folks, and again, it's most, but is we are very fearful or not so confident in the area of looking at return on investment or having that conversation and talking numbers, talking finance with our leadership or even with our employees, and we need to be better at doing that. So I want to give you a little bit of insights on how to become more comfortable with it. There are 2 different ways to think about or calculations for savings when it comes to return on investment, and the first one is hard savings, so the actual reduction in cost. So, we reduced the FTEs, we sold the building, we had an opportunity to cut the supplies, and there's some examples coming up, but all those hard savings. And then there's also soft savings. So in other words, it's the concept of doing more with less. And again, we're going to be talking about these examples coming up, but they're both valuable. A great way to have a conversation, but you just kind of have to know, am I doing hard savings or am I doing soft savings? And another way to look at this is that you can calculate it based on the cost of quality or the cost of defect. A cost of defect is going to be in those costs to avoid, find, or make repairs. So, or excuse me, that's cost of quality. So being able to say, you know, if we would prevent one hospital-acquired infection, if we would prevent one fall, that's a cost of quality. So what is it going to take us to do that? The other one is the cost of defect, which is how much labor and money and time is it going to take to correct those things. And that is after the fact. And so you say the cost of that fall happening is such and such. Those are good. You can have both of these, and you can have conversations around both of the concepts within your organization, but you just need to be open and honest, and both of them are valuable to present to your case for quality. So let's talk a little bit about even the concept of what I mean by return on investment. The concept of return on investment is the money it takes to get to the improvement, or excuse me, the benefit of the improvement divided by the money spent. So, for example, if the benefit of buying a new machine is we are going to have a $500,000 benefit by this, maybe we're going to be able to move one more patient through or two more patients through a month, and it's going to be $500,000 in benefit. But we need to spend $1 million to get that new machine. It's not a very high return on investment. What you want to see is that you get a high benefit and a low spend. And so this is where you see people say it's a 5-to-1. In other words, we get $5 of benefit for every $1 we spend. And there's some important conversations around that. And that truly is the concept of return on investment. And so we talk about these in savings and, again, in that hard or soft, and you can read through these and see what the hard savings are. But one thing that I want to make note is, yes, I will acknowledge that reduction in our labor, in our FTEs, is a way to save money. However, we need to be extremely, extremely cautious to not ever do this, because you do not ever, ever, ever want to reduce the workforce during a quality improvement effort or as the result of a quality improvement effort. Why? Because if you do, you're going to not ever have individuals participate again. And why would they? I wouldn't either. If I saw a team and they worked hard and they reduced and saved and created new, and then I lost my job because of it, I wouldn't do it either. And so you want to be careful about these hard savings and using lean or PDSA or anything else as a way to save money by reducing our FTEs. Much easier to cut back on supplies or save overtime or rental equipment or whatever it might be as examples of hard savings. So one of the things that I love about savings is calculating the soft savings, whether it's in time or satisfaction or retention. Maybe it's saving a staff member from being burnt out and quitting, or saving that physical space. And I gave you the calculations there for time. You can read through, if you think about if you save 10 minutes, but you do it 3 times a day, times 7 days a week, you're doing something 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 10 minutes we save, and we do it for 52 weeks every week of the year, times $20 an hour, is a savings of $3,600 just by saving 10 minutes in the process. Granted, we do it 3 times a day, but it's 30 minutes a day, but it's every day of the week, every week of the year, and so we get to save very, very quickly, save some money. And satisfaction and retention are the same way, you know, so if we can keep people coming in the door and keep our staff from leaving, again, getting burnout or wanting to quit or whatever, because we're improving their work, it's all valuable. It's all soft savings, and we continue to strive for that. Those are the important ones, and those are the ones that often are not necessarily affecting the bottom line directly, but indirectly they definitely do affect your bottom line. And so again, we talk about cost of quality or cost of defects, and two different ways to look at this. And so, you know, if we can continue to improve the work that we do and prevent those errors, or do we just continue to react and react and react? If we can get to the cost of quality side of things, where we're preventing and not having the errors occur in the first place by using waste reduction and reducing medical harm and satisfaction issues and all the legal fees, it does add up. We can actually win this battle of healthcare costs, and we need to be able to have a very candid, very open, and very confident conversation as healthcare quality professionals out there in the world. So one last moment of inspiration for you to be able to go out and improve your skills in the area of talking about finances. So with that, I will wrap up our conversation today and our WebEx. If you have any questions, I challenge you to think differently and think about doing something different tomorrow, or improving your skills, or doing it, maybe it's one new tool, whatever it might be, but I challenge you to think differently. But along the way, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to any of us here at IHC. We're more than happy to be able to help you and give us a shout or an email, and we can definitely help you improve and advance your quality, value, and safety within your organization. So thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.